Welcome everybody to the Norton Planning Board's meeting of Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Again, this is a hybrid public meeting, so members of the public and board members are welcome to participate in person or remotely. In person, we are here at the Norton Public Library, 68 East Main Street. To join the meeting via the Zoom function, there is a meeting link available in the agenda, as well as you can also join using the Zoom app with meeting ID 638-929-1060. There's also a phone number to dial in directly that way as well. If you are joining remotely, please ask that you please keep your lines muted when not speaking. And there will be specific times dedicated to public comment for any relevant items upon the agenda. The meeting will also be available on Norton Cable Access, Channel 15, and available afterwards on the Norton Media Center page after it's edited and posted online. For future meetings, please feel free to email questions for the board ahead of the meeting to Brian Carmichael, town staff, who's seated to my right, and they can be read into the record in the event you're not able to attend a future session, or would simply like a letter or other comments sent to the board in advance. So, with that out of the way, I'll call the meeting to order here. I don't think we have any planning board business and policies to, or Eric, you had a spreadsheet that you wanted to look through at some point at the end. Is that okay if we put that to the end?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay. So that'll go through some articles for town meeting, correct? That's the plan?
Yeah, well, the bylaws.
The bylaws.
Right? Yeah, just a sheet that kind of maybe help us look at bylaws and prioritize and whatnot.
Okay. We don't have any bills and warrants to approve right now or minutes. And we do have a discussion on the Capital Investments Committee, which I'll also push to the end after the public hearings with that. So we do have two public hearings on the agenda this evening. The first one is SP 20475. That is for 0 Rear Eddy Street. It's an application for 4 duplexes with a common driveway in a wetland district. So I will ask, looks like we have an engineer already coming up to the podium here. So I will just ask if you can introduce yourself for the record and go into a proposal about the project. I know you did this project in a different form, was presented to this board previously. I believe I'm the only member left who saw the original one, so I think we should just start from scratch.
Okay, Craig Siganowski, RIM Engineering. I believe it says Sherry, that's Sherry Wydack and Sam Wydack, the owners of the property. I guess Sam. Margaret Bacon should be on. She's the engineer that was brought in, civil site engineering.
She's there as well.
Okay, so she will be able to share screen, but if anybody wants paper copies, I have 18 by 24 set. It's easier to look at. So yeah, back at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember it was 2019 or 2020, we had filed and then got delayed, of course, because of that. And then got held up through stormwater review with conservation for several years. And because of that, and because the board members had all changed, we had to withdraw because we did not have the votes to get approval. And Margaret was asked to kind of redefine the project, come back with a upgrade to what was originally proposed. But the overview is that we're asking for a special permit for a common driveway to serve 4 lots. I know the address comes up as 0 Eddy Street, but we're actually off of Torrent Avenue, right at where the bridge crosses the railroad tracks. We're on the south side of the railroad, on the west side of Torrent Avenue. The property does run parallel to Eddy Street all the way up to Jackson Street. I assume that's why it's called 0 Eddy Street on the town maps. So we do have the Meadowbrook River, been determined to be a river that runs through the property from the west end all the way to to Torrent Avenue and crosses under a bridge. We have gone before conservation in the past few years, and we have the wetlands line and the floodplain line established. It was determined that this is a river, so we have a 100-foot buffer zone for the riparian and the 200-foot riparian zone of the river to contend with, as well as 100-foot buffer zone from the bordering vegetated wetlands. So at this point, Margaret has redesigned the site with stormwater. I was talking to her earlier tonight. It's not completely approved, but she's at the stage where she could submit changes for the approval with conservation. So the other special permit we're asking for is, we have the right, we're in the wetlands, so the Water Resource Protection District. I believe it's elevation 70 and lower, so we're allowed to have single-family houses. We're asking for a special permit for duplexes. In place of the single-family houses, the lots are all over 80,000 square feet, which is what is required for duplexes in this zone. So we had never got approvals, of course, because we kept getting delayed. We had more or less verbal okays with what we were doing. The fire department has looked at the driveway that we propose, which exceeds the 500 feet. That's not a regulation, but a recommendation, and I believe it's worded as unless you have approval that the additional length of the road is not an issue. The fire department looked at the road as 1,200 feet long instead of the 500, and they've, at the time, and I believe Sam would have documentation to show that they've approved the 1,200 feet rather than the 500 that's in the bylaw. So if Margaret is on, or Sam, if they want to take over at this point.
Sure, I can. My name is Margaret Bacon. I'm a wetland scientist and also a licensed engineer for civil site engineering. And we did do a significant design change in this since the last time this was before the board. Since I guess most of you weren't here at that time, you won't notice the difference. But if you can let me share a screen, I'll kind of show you what the old design was and what the new design is now.
You should
That's okay?
You should have the ability. Is it not letting you?
How to grant the share, but she's able to share.
There we
Can
go.
you see that okay?
Yep.
We see you.
It's there, okay, let me just pull it out. So this is just an overlay that shows that the original design, the common driveway is here in red, okay, with the original house locations here. And with that design, we were having a hard time getting the stormwater to work because it was on the other side of the road. So what we've done, we actually pushed the proposed common driveway as close as zoning will allow to the upper property limits, and by leaving the required 20-foot, vegetated zone. And so that allowed us to actually move that driveway a lot farther away from the wetlands, and then also to put the stormwater controls on the downhill side of this roadway. So, let's see. So here's just an overview of what, the proposed, common driveway would look like with the 4 duplexes, with the septics in the front. The green obviously is lawn area. And then, as mentioned, I have 2 stormwater controls that pretty much will capture all the runoff off the roadway and treat all that stormwater. And I did get some comments back from the Conservation Commission's stormwater consultant. I pretty much addressed most of his comments, and I'm going to send him back a revised drainage report along with some tweaks on this plan. I wanted to wait till after this meeting with this board before I did that, but pretty much most of his comments have been addressed. There are minor tweaks here and there regarding, certain elevations in the outlets of the drainage structure and things like that. I won't get into those details.
Okay. Okay. Did
So
you?
I think basically, I think we we address all the requirements under the common driveway, except we are asking for the waiver for the length. We are 1,250 feet long, but as you can see, the first half of the driveway is so narrow, and because of wetlands, you can't really do anything there anyways, except for the stormwater basin. So we don't really start, having house lots till after the driveway is about 600 feet long.
Okay. And is the green the limit of clearing on this map, or is that related to the drainage?
Say that again?
The green color on the
That's
map?
just the lawn, estimated lawn area.
Okay. And roughly how far away is that from the property line to abutters? I'm not sure if you heard my question. Did you hear it?
No, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Roughly how far is that from the property line from the abutters, just for an idea of scale?
Oh, right here it's 25 feet.
And going the other direction? South?
Oh, south,
Or down
yeah,
on the map?
Here's the
Whichever.
pond, so geez, it's gotta be a couple hundred feet. I mean, actually, our properties, it ends on the other side of that pond, right here. So I would say this distance from where our development has gotta be, I don't know, over 500 feet, I would think. Because right now, here's the pond in the center, and then the 200-foot riverfront, we're just barely in the 200-foot river. So yeah, I would say 400 to 500 feet away.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to get an idea of scale.
Yeah.
Okay. So I understand you're going back and forth with the peer reviewer for stormwater. I'll turn to other members of the board if they have questions related to either the stormwater as it relates to the river or the proposal as a whole in terms of zoning, etc. Laura, yes.
Can you show us where the frontage is for lot 1, please?
All the frontages are on Route 140.
Okay. It does not appear that you have the required frontage for lot 1.
If I may, we had done an A&R plan that was approved by the planning board. That's the same frontage. Frontage follows the layout of Route 140, which is not a straight line there. You have 67.95 plus 35 plus 56.25. We meet the 150-foot requirement. If you look where the bridge crosses,
Yeah, but
the property
you're
line
not
is,
on,
yeah,
So
that's,
so
that's
the-
not your land.
yeah, it is. That's the highway layout.
So there is a cutout
Correct.
of land that you don't own, that you do not have frontage on,
We-
on Taunton Ave.
It's owned by the highway, so that's our road, that's frontage.
Land is considered frontage?
I don't know what you mean by land. What you're seeing where it jumps in 35 feet,
Yes.
that's the layout of the highway.
I'm looking at the aerial, it's land, that's not a road.
Right, it's not paved, but it's part of Route 140.
So,
Route 140 is our layout line.
so even though the fact that the road does not go straight gives you that additional. Is this east and west on the map? I'm sorry if my compass directions are off.
Well, the highway's running north-south.
Yeah, so it's roughly, so that east-west addition.
Yeah.
So,
It's the space where they built the bridge for the railroad to go underneath.
Right.
That's why
It's
it's
elevated
extra
at that
wide.
point. It
It's
doesn't meet the
still the
road.
road.
okay,
If you're standing at the bottom of that property line, you're
Looking up
probably
at the road.
20 feet down or so from the road.
Yeah. I don't understand how that's considered frontage.
okay. Okay.
Well, frontage is based on the legal layout of the highway, not on where you actually drive. So in this case, the highway on both sides with the bridge, they did that for the layout.
Okay.
If your property line extended all the way to the buffer of the railroad, I
Right,
agree
if
with
it
you,
came straight
but it
through.
jogs in.
Right, if it came straight through, you would not have the 150 feet there.
Okay.
But as I said, we have an approved A&R plan that was, at the time, 2020, signed by the planning board at that time, the same frontages.
I would, an A&R is not necessarily determination of zoning.
No, it's not a
What-
determination of
but
zoning,
what-
but it's a determination of frontage, access, and lot area, not buildability.
Correct. So, but to a point, Laura, what we would need to satisfy your question is a definition of frontage.
Yes,
Okay,
and that land they don't own can be constituted as frontage.
okay. So, we will try and make sure that we have the applicable definition of frontage. I'm trying to pull up the zoning bylaws now. Shockingly, there's a lot of different mentions of the word frontage in the bylaws.
Yeah,
So it
I
may
looked
take
at
a
the
minute,
definition. It's sort of, it says it goes along the street front, which this does not go along a street front.
Is that from our
Yeah,
bylaws?
2.2 definition.
That is, sorry, which,
Yeah, 2.2 is all the definitions.
okay, so frontage definition in our zoning bylaws is the length of the property line of any one premises along a public right-of-way on which it borders. It doesn't say accessible right-of-way.
I would also say their property doesn't border the road.
It's the right-of-way, not the road itself.
Okay,
So, that's the definition in the bylaws.
okay.
So we can, so does that, so yes, so there's certainly a question about how well it meets the spirit of frontage.
Yeah,
By the wording of our bylaws, that is the right of way.
okay.
But good point.
So, can you also walk me through the elevation of each of these properties?
As it relates to the wetlands and everything else?
Wetland Protection District, yes.
Okay. Is that something that,
Are you looking to see what the elevation change is?
I'm looking to determine whether this actually qualifies. So I'm sure you're aware, our Wetland Protection District permitted uses. G, construction of a single-family home on a frontage lot. So we're already not getting single-family homes. The boundary to which this property applies, or this Wetland Protection District applies, states that all land lying at the elevation 70 feet mean sea level draining to Meadowbrook and Meadowbrook Pond between South Worcester and Taunton Ave, which in looking at the contours of the map and the location, it would appear all of these properties fall within the Wetland Protection District to some extent, and the location of the actual buildings, from what I can gather, only Lot 4 seems to be situated at a placement above 70 feet. And even then, it's not the full amount, it's not the full property. It's only about 90% of that property. And then it gets worse from there. The majority of Lot 3 is below 70 feet. 100% of Lot 2 is below 70 feet, and 100% of Lot 1 is below 70 feet. So I'm struggling with, the bylaw allows for single-family homes. And you're asking for a waiver of that when, you know, you're clearly within the wetland protection district.
If I may.
Sure.
In the wetland protection district, it does grant us the authority to grant special permits based on the underlying zoning district.
I see that, but it also
Which-
gives us guidance as to the wetland protection district.
I'm not saying we shouldn't enforce it, I'm just saying it's not banned.
Oh, I
I
didn't say
can't- I
it was
can't say
banned.
we-
I'm struggling with the request that's being asked.
Sure.
So, and I watched the last conservation meeting where the owner came on and said why she was developing this, but I had an issue with the fact that they said they wanted to minimalistically develop it. And this does not present as minimalistic.
Thank you.
Please, well, okay. So, Laura, did
If
you
she
have any
wants to
other?
build single-family homes, fine with it. I'm okay with the, you know, I have questions about the driveway and snow removal and where that's gonna go, but other than that,
Okay,
I don't think this was, I don't think what is presented is what was intended in our bylaws.
okay. Okay,
I got a question.
sure.
The lots that are laid out here, are those already set in stone? Those are already done? Or is that
That
part of
is-
this project?
There was an A and R, and that delineated the lots that we see here, correct? So there has been an A and R which has been done. Lot lines can always be changed,
Okay.
but these were designed, I believe, specifically to give the 4 buildable lots per the underlying zoning that we see. So there's probably not a whole lot of movement that would happen with them, especially as it relates to 140.
I'm sure not, but I feel like it's in our bylaws that we're not supposed to allow for any gerrymandered lots in the creation of new lots. Like they're supposed to be pretty rectangular at this point.
There is a shape factor requirement. Do these meet the shape factor?
Yes, all the lots do meet the shape factor.
Okay. If you asked me to calculate a shape factor, I couldn't, but I know that that's the purpose of the shape factor, and if we meet it, then it comes out the magic mathematical box.
Yes, each lot does meet the shape factor, and it's on actually this sheet right here, and I'm sure it's on the some of the other sheets. So here's lot 2, and you can see we meet the shape factor of 16 and the contiguous upland area. So all the lots meet those criteria.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay. Steve, did you have?
The frontage itself, is that supposed to be like an access regardless of whether we were going to allow a common driveway? Because if we were to say no common driveway, a lot of these homes would not have the ability to be accessed.
I would assume that 1 would, maybe 2. Yes, that is correct. We would be, they need to be taken together. That would be my assumption, which,
Yeah,
to be fair, isn't different than a whole bunch of other projects that we do see, so.
Okay. The other comment, I guess, the 2 end houses, they're overlapping buffer zones. And especially that one at the very end. I don't know how much we can regulate the placement of those ones, but they seem a little bit haphazard altogether. But they're definitely, the one on this side's in the river zone, the riparian area, the buffer.
It's allowed up to, if you watch the conservation meeting, it's allowed up to a certain percent, and this is a very large area of land.
Yeah.
The area of disturbance was minimal, so they were okay with this.
Okay.
But they did have some there were a lot of questions raised that would come back to us.
Okay.
I got one other, I guess. On the former plan, they had a single driveway for each unit, well, for each building, and now they've doubled the driveways.
To do in and outs, is that?
What is the idea behind doubling the driveway space, and they're not actually like perpendicular to the road, they're kind of haphazard, especially the ones on the cul-de-sac.
Okay. Craig, would you want to just speak to the layout of the driveways for each property?
Yeah, well, Margaret designed this, but I would assume it's to give access to each unit on their own. The other design was, excuse me, the garages were in the center of the buildings, living space on the sides. This has the living space in the center, garages on the outside. So each unit would get its own driveway.
Since they're duplexes, okay. So that's the
That's
logic
answer.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then also, another reason to have them on the side like we do is so we could fit the septics in the front yard, 2 separate septic systems for both duplexes.
Is there a plan in place for 15, 20 years down the line when those septic systems expire? Where new fields might get put in, where that material will get put?
Yeah, what would typically happen if any of these failed, 10 years, 20 years down the road, they'd come in and they'd take out the old system and put another one in pretty much right where it's at right now. That happens all the time. And that's why these systems are designed for new construction a little bigger and wider than they have to be. In theory, they have these reserve trenches in between. So in theory, you know, what's supposed to happen is when these things fail 20 years down the road, you put trenches in between, but that never happens. What happens when a system fails, the whole thing comes out, all the contaminated soil comes out, and they bring back in fresh Title V sand and put the system right back in where it was.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want to continue with somebody else for a moment?
Sure. Alan, I know that they mentioned that they had showed this to fire. I know that's always one of the things that you focus on.
I saw the letter from, I'm not sure if they've seen the letter from the deputy.
Do you want to just recap?
It came to us, Brian passed it on, and I believe Margaret also received it.
There's no problem.
The letter from the fire department?
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Yes, we did, and his concerns were making sure the cul-de-sac was big enough so that he could, access around there with his fire truck, and he gave me some dimensions, and I believe we meet all those, and then he also had a concern about providing water or sprinklers to these buildings, so our client is proposing to, tap into the water line on Taunton Route 140 and bring a loop water line down here with several hydrants. So we have a loop water system and no wells, and that way it'll provide fire protection to those buildings. Those are the two comments. And then he also, he gave me some reference material regarding the water lines and things like that I haven't had a chance to take a look at.
Personally, I'd like to see the letter from the deputy saying this plan does comply. And also a letter from the water department saying it's sufficient supply on the street and their design would meet their criteria.
Okay.
Back to underlying zoning, under 175 5.1, I'm just wondering if through conservation, any time it comes up, has this land been subject to any periodic or seasonal flooding at all?
We do have a floodplain on the river, and that was established and approved by them. The last sheet of the set should have what was approved by conservation.
Did you put it up on the screen?
Sheet 7, Margaret,
Just to confirm.
Say that again?
the last sheet of the set that shows what was approved by conservation, the sheet that I gave you? No, the
The ANRAD sheet.
ANRAD sheet, yes.
Yeah, I don't have it up here, but there is an ANRAD sheet at the, attached to the submittal that does confirm all the wetland lines, the riverfront area, the vegetated wetlands and the floodplain lines, all been confirmed
Yeah.
through the ANRAD process that was done last year.
Yeah,
Not so much that, it's 175, 5.1, letter B, states to provide that lands in the town of Norton, subject to periodic or seasonal flooding, shall not be used for residence or other purposes.
Right, so we have established that elevation 63.0 is floodplain. Conservation has approved that. We did it through multiple ways. The elevation of the property, there's a controlled spillway at where the river goes underneath the highway. So
I'm sorry, could you repeat what elevation the flood?
63.0.
So,
So
To-
the average bank around the river is 64, 65.
so
And what are all the properties?
So
To 74?
So,
But
yeah,
that-
so
that's-
pretty much the floodplain limits, it pretty much coincides with this green line here, the wetland limits. I think within for most areas, so we're well away from any, impacting any floodplain areas.
And the
So as you can see, that the farther down you go, the farther away that wetland limits goes along with the floodplain limits.
The bylaw just doesn't say floodplain, it just says periodic or seasonal flooding.
Okay?
but from the applicant's perspective, you're saying that if you stay above that elevation and away from the riverfront, then you're in land that is not subject to that flooding?
Correct. In this floodplain, elevation here along the wetland limits is the 100-year floodplain. So anything less than that is not even, obviously, it's not going to go up that far.
That 100-year flood doesn't mean anything nowadays, it seems, though. Seems that's more than...
No, that's true, things keep changing, but it'd have to go up, several feet really to impact anything that we're doing up here. And that's quite a bit of water.
Okay. Jim, I know you're joining us remotely here. I want to make sure that I'm giving you an opportunity here, since I can't look down the table at you and get your eye language here. Did you have any
I'm good,
questions?
Tim. I would grab your attention if I needed to add anything.
You're not shy, but I got to make sure you're
awake.
That too. Okay. Eric or Wayne, anything that you wanted to ask at this point? I see Steve has his finger up again, so.
Not at this point, no.
What about clearing the snow from the road? Do we have any storage plan, or where's the snow gonna get removed to? How are we gonna deal with rock salt, that kind of stuff?
So in terms of snow removal and treatment in the wetland district, is there a snow storage area on the map, or is that not pictured?
Yeah, that was brought up at the Conservation Commission meeting also, and so, yeah, we're gonna provide some locations for snow removal.
But it's not,
And another thing too, since this is a private road, it's not gonna get the same amount of treatment that typical roadways get, especially, a state highway where it's plastered with the salt. It will get some treatment, but nowhere near the same amount. And everything, and all the pavement, as I mentioned before, all the pavement, it goes into these stormwater basins. They have so here's another diagram showing all the areas that are gonna flow to the two basins. So it's the entire roadway, and then a little extra grassed areas. But all that's going to go to the stormwater basins. And well, another thing too down in that area, the soils are nice sandy gravel soils, so they can absorb quite a bit of water. which is a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Understanding that the applicant still has changes they're making to the plan for stormwater and some of the other items. Are there any other questions that we have either for people in the room, engineers on the line here? Otherwise, I think I know there are probably people here in the room who may, or joining us virtually, who may want to speak as well.
Do I understand stormwater's already been peer reviewed or it's in process?
It's in process. I believe that they were looking to address the peer review's comments. And if I remember correctly from the conservation session, that was with Pat Brennan, correct?
Correct. And pretty much the comments are just about done, so I'll probably be formally submitting back to the peer review consultant at the beginning of next week.
Okay. Okay.
I'm cool.
Okay. If you don't mind ceding the podium, I'll ask if there's anybody in person or remotely who'd like to speak. Obviously, there are people joining remotely and people here in the room. If you'd like to come up to the podium here in the room, please do. If you'd like to speak and you've joined the meeting remotely, I'd ask that you please try to use the it's a reactions function in the Zoom meeting, and there's a raise your hand button. If you do that, we'll see you, we'll know you're waiting, and we'll kind of try and go back and forth as best we can between both to give everybody a chance to speak. So, sorry to keep you standing up there while I rambled on for a second,
No, that's okay.
but if you could just say your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Catherine Reibner. I live at 5 Lester Gray Drive in Norton. I happen to be a volunteer at Winslow Farm, which abuts the proposed development. I have been asked to speak on behalf of Deb White, the president and founder of the farm, and on behalf of several of the supporters and other volunteers who are here today and joining us remotely. The board has already addressed a number of the concerns that we have. Frontage, that was an issue we identified, as well as it appears the detention pond in the first house closest to Route 140 is within the 200-foot buffer zone, which we identified as a potential issue here. You talked about zoning for single-family homes. That is an issue for us as well. We understand the special permit is required to get around that requirement. We also had concerns about snow removal, which is also addressed. There are just a number of issues here that we find to be problematic. We understand that the driveway itself is 1,200 feet. However, there's a 500-foot requirement under the Norton zoning bylaws. Apparently, the fire department has okayed that. We do have a question about the angle of the driveway, however, and whether that has already been approved. My understanding is that the Norton zoning bylaws require a minimum of 45 degrees between the center line of the common driveway and access to Route 140 in this case, and I'm wondering if that has been addressed by the plans and if that is an issue.
I will note that again, and after we go to some public comments, I'll ask the engineer to speak to that.
Thank you. In addition, and this was raised with the Conservation Commission as well, and that is with respect to the ownership of the dam that's at Meadowbrook Pond. I think the response we got was that the dam will ultimately be owned by the homeowners, but I just wanted to clarify that, if that's going to be an issue, and if it is owned by the homeowners, do we really think the homeowners will want to accept that responsibility and will actually maintain the dam?
Again, I'll note that down. My expectation is that in a setup like this, there might be some kind of a homeowners association set up to manage both the snow removal from the road as well as maintenance of the road and maintenance of the dam in this case. So that would be something that would potentially be included in that, rather than Joe buys the first house, Joe is responsible for the dam.
Another potential issue we identified is the grade of the common driveway. We understand that the maximum grade allowed is a 10% gradient, and I'm just wondering if that is in compliance here.
Thank you.
And also, we're wondering if there's any recognition of the historical nature of the property. We understand that in the 19th and 20th centuries, Furnace Brook Ice Mill, Norton Copper Works, and Norton Furnace Company were located on this property, and there's still some remnants of those buildings on this property to date. Not sure if that's of issue here, of concern, if there's any special protections associated with that.
I'm not sure if there's any official recognition. Steve, are you aware of anything that's on that?
Nothing's officially labeled. It's a local thing, but nothing the state's done anything about.
It's also been brought to our attention by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection that this area was mapped as an area of critical environmental concern and a priority habitat at one point. We're wondering if that has been investigated and addressed.
So it was identified as an ACEC, as the acronym goes.
Okay.
Okay.
I trust you.
Okay.
And yes, an area of critical environmental concern and a priority habitat. We know that there are box turtles and other species of critical concern that inhabit this pond. So that's a concern we have, and we want to make sure that that's addressed. And then the last question I believe I have is just an administrative question, and that is whether the planning board, and maybe this is you, sir, has a director, and how the process unfolds in terms of voting and the board approving or rejecting the application.
The board doesn't have a director. I'm the chair of the planning board. There is a director of planning and economic development position in Norton. That position is currently vacant. So in terms of process and procedure, right now the applicant has said that they're still revising the plans. So I never try to predict the future, but my assumption is that we probably will not be voting this evening. The applicant said that they would be responding to the peer reviewer next week. Engineers go back and forth a little bit, that we would potentially continue this discussion to a future meeting. The next meeting in 2 weeks might be tight, given that engineers go back and forth and who knows how long it's going to take. And rather than continuing, then continuing again, we haven't gotten to that point yet. When we do reach the end of our discussions on this submittal, then we'll ask the applicant when they think they would be ready to present any finalizations or anything like that, and then we would continue to a specific date that you would have.
And then it's a majority vote? Is that how?
For special permits, it's a supermajority, so it would be 5 out of 7 that would be needed. For other ones, it is a simple majority. For a special permit, it is 5 out of 2, or 5 out of 7.
Thank you very much. I guess I just want to conclude by saying Winslow Farm, myself, our supporters here are opposed to this development for a number of the issues that have been highlighted by myself and others, and I appreciate the time to have spoken here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I do see somebody in the virtual meeting who's, I'm going to say your Zoom name says Sherry. So if you want to come off mute and just introduce your name for yourself for the record. If you'd like to come on camera, you can. You're not required to if you don't want to.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Sherry Wydack, and I'm the owner of Sherport, proposing the development. I obviously see that the abutters are vehemently opposed to this project because, of course, they've seen this beautiful, glorious land across the pond for 40 years. And I've paid for it for 40 years. And there has to be something done to it. I mean, historically, Meadowbrook was a brook, that was dammed up by the ice company to produce ice. Currently, the state is taking down all the dams because, and we could petition the state to privately have this dam removed. And it would go back to a brook, historic Meadow Brook. And they have characterized it as having riverine characteristics, which means it flows. It's a tributary from the 3 Mile River. So in essence, all this land that is the pond would now become a brook. It would have no water in it. And that is a right because we own the dam. So I think in lieu of people saying that this is an overdevelopment, we base our assumption on what the board was approving in town. They were approving common driveways. They were approving proposed duplexes. So this isn't something that we went off on our own tangent and said, oh, we want to do this, but nobody else is doing it. That's not true. There's a case on Old Town Ave where the person got approval for 4 duplexes, and it's in a large, this is a larger area. This is 48 acres. 48 acres. Currently, next to the old Roche Plaza, you have 200 units going on maybe 10 acres or 5 acres, and that's a 40B. So we are not trying to circumvent the law of the local bylaws. We are trying to go and abide by your bylaws and do a respectable development. But it seems in Norton, or it seems with the my abutters, that they're opposed to it. So they should really get a fund going and purchase the land. That's what they should do. I'm not opposed to selling it to them. So something has to be redefined here. We need to have some type of redevelopment here because currently it's used by a lot of people, but they're not paying for it. I am. And I can't pay for it anymore with no development. It has to be the trash, people dump things there. People, they love it there. They fish, they kayak, they take their canoe. And I believe if it is such a viable land, it should be maybe the people of Norton should own it. They should preserve it. And it could be a wonderful park and recreation for them. But for me right now, it has to be developed or it has to be sold, either or. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand your comments. It's your land. You're entitled to submit a project to develop on it. At the same time, I'm not going to tell anybody they can't speak or they can't be upset about something, and we try to take all that into measured consideration as best we can.
So I also add, we take every project by itself, not what we've approved before. Every single project is looked at on its own fruitions and not what we've approved, excuse me, what we've approved in the past has nothing to do with what we're looking at today, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Sherry, I'm just going to ask if you can just lower your raised hand in the Zoom meeting, otherwise the OCD part of my brain is going to keep picking up on it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. I'll ask if there's anybody else in the room here who'd like to speak.
Yeah,
okay, we've got a couple more here. I'll let you two decide who wants to go first, but I guess you're first off the stick.
Great. I live on Town Avenue, about 4 houses up from the bridge.
And just state your name for the record, please,
Yeah,
sir.
Bobby Ray.
Okay.
And I'm a contractor. I do remodel mostly. These pictures all look nice and they're all done professionally and they're just nice, you know. But nobody's addressed the safety part of this. It takes me sometimes a prayer to get out of my driveway to get on this 140 in the morning and at night to get back into my driveway. Now the exit in this piece of land here is at the very top of the bridge, which is a blind spot coming both ways. That is just nothing but a disaster waiting to happen. And he went from single-family homes to duplexes, where instead of just having one house with three bedrooms, now they have two duplexes with 8 bedrooms, times 4. You know the traffic they could have just that little common drive right there in that little area, with the amount of kids and everything else, and the railroad tracks, and nobody's interested in the safety of this thing. Everybody just worried about the bucks, the dollars. She's so worried about paying for this all the time, they're gonna sell it.
That's,
But have some consideration for the safety of the people that could possibly live there, and the accidents and everything else. I mean, it just, the train goes by there at least 4 times a day. What about the trains? What about the kids playing on tracks and stuff? I know it's not her concern, but it's still a safety factor and something to be considered.
thank you.
And it's not a river, it's a pond. It's a huge pond. You know, it looks nice on pictures. I suggest everybody in this board here, take the time sometime this week, go down here and walk the lane yourself. Then you see exactly what you're dealing with.
If, yeah.
Instead of pretty pictures.
Thank you, Bobby.
Okay. And I think I've stated this before in previous sessions, but if we do feel that we want to do a site visit, we can schedule that. It is against a few different things, but please don't go on private property on your own. Okay. Is there anybody else over here who wants to go up next? I guess you were great folks first.
So that's my father, Bobby. My name's Lucas Ray. I live across the street. I grew up on, my father's house, my grandparents' house. So there's a few issues I have. So one thing I'd like to address is the property, the land value that Mrs. Wydack spoke about. I just looked it up quickly on the, the Norton database. According to the Norton website, it says that her land value is like $175,000. So it's roughly around $2,400 a month she's paying in taxes, if I calculate that right. So, she's making a big fuss about the expense, but it's not that dramatic.
I had a planning board colleague who said at one point, if you move into your house and your neighbor has a tree that gives you beautiful shade in your backyard, take a picture. It's their tree. They can do with that they want.
I understand that. So the other issue, the safety concern my father mentioned, I'll also reiterate, I live across the street. Back when Cisco was there, it was even 10 times worse because of the tractor trailers coming over the bridge. It is a blind spot. I've had my mailbox taken out twice. I had my stone wall taken out, and I had a tree taken out in 4 separate accidents in the last 5 years. There was also a pretty bad crash in my father's house here. The car flipped over. People come over that hill, like madmen. They're crazy. They fly over that hill. The other thing, I lost a dog on that hill. I mean, it's crazy. That bridge is dangerous. The common entry for this common driveway that they're proposing, it's only about 30 feet wide. So if you're coming from Norton Center, I'm just curious how the fire department figures they're going to make a U-turn into that property to squeeze a fire truck. You almost got to make a U-turn to make this radius. The other thing is, when you're salting the road, I heard the conservation meeting, but when you're coming in and you're plowing, I plow a lot too. So when you come in and you're plowing and you're salting, you may be able to control the snow plowing if you push it all to the right. If you push it to the left, it's going down the embankment into the pond. There's no way you're going to be able to control the salt coming off the sanders. When we run those sanders, you hit the button, you can't control that salt. So there's definitely going to be salt getting in the pond. I know that's not a zoning issue, it's a conservation issue, but that should be addressed. As far as the trash, I've been there 4 times in the last 5 years cleaning up trash. I've messaged Mr. Wydack on Facebook. I get no response. We used to ride and take the kids down there and walk the land. They put 2 or 3 big concrete boulders right in the path so we couldn't get down there. The police department was under the impression that they were going to move some boulders in front of the entry. There's been a boat there for like 3 years. I messaged Mr. Wydack 2 months ago and proposed, I would clean up the site myself. I own a construction company in town. I got a bunch of guys that work for me. You know, I'll go down there and we'll clean up the mess. I'll put it in my own construction dumpster and take care of the cost if they would move the pillars to the main entry so that people would quit making this a dump site. I get no response. I've been down there 4 times in the last few years cleaning. One time I was down there cleaning up trash, I got yelled at. Some woman pulled in, I'm not sure who she was, yelled at me for being down there, private property. The place is a dump. There's a TV in the lake, there's a mattress down there, there's a boat that's been there for 3 years we've been looking at. I'll gladly go over there with my crew, cut up the boat, get rid of the mattresses and clean up. And I even offered to, to run a machine across the street. I can talk to my neighbor and run the machine across the street to move those pillars if they're willing to block that entry so that people stop using that as a dump site and, whatever else they get going on down there. There's cars parked there all the time. The other issue, like my father mentioned, is the safety issue. The train goes by, I think 11 o'clock at night, 4 o'clock in the morning. You're putting up 32 bedrooms. How many kids are going to be in there? How many, when I was a kid, we used to live on the tracks in Mansfield. We were young and dumb. We used to play on the tracks all the time when the train's speeding by. That would be a concern for me. I mean, it's a concern for me, and I live a few hundred feet away from the tracks when I had young kids. So these people are going to be living 20 feet, 25 feet. Is that what it is? From the house, front of the house to the tracks. I know it's an issue on the other side of the tracks with the other abutting neighbors. For the houses that went in on the other side. And the other thing I'd like to mention too is, there's some paths that have been on this property since I was a kid. I used to walk down there. My grandfather would go fishing down there. Recently in the past couple of years, trees have been cut down on the paths, right next to the pond. Trees have been. You can walk to this day. You can walk down the path and you can see the freshly cut trees that were cut down intentionally to block the paths. I'm not saying who did it. I don't know who did it. It's not my land, but it's a little suspect to me. The radius of the driveway. I know the Mrs. White had her representative up here. And the slope of that driveway in the winters when you're coming in and it's icy and it's snowy. Are they going to put a guardrail on that left side so people don't go over the hill and in the drink, or what are we doing? I mean, I think that's a major issue. When you're coming down a steep slope in the winter, I slide down my driveway, all the time, and this is a lot steeper than my driveway. So, and you got a pond with about a 30-foot drop into the lake. So, and those are my issues as a neighbor. I know that the other abutting neighbor, the direct abutting neighbor, Mr. Lacombe, he's in his 80s. He's not able to make it, but I know he's opposed to it too. It's pretty much everybody in the neighborhood's opposed to it. So. But it's up to you guys to decide. So.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay. Craig, I don't know if you or I just had taken down a couple of questions relating to driveways and different things, and if you want to speak to that, or if you want
I think Barbara could answer the question on the slope and not sure if she has the angle coming off of
yeah.
Todd Avenue.
So I see you have the slope diagram there already queued up there.
Yeah, the proposed slope, the solid line right here, is a little flatter than what's there now, the existing, which is a dotted line underneath. So right now, coming down the entranceway, it's about 4.5%. And then that's the steepest part of the entire driveway, and then it's pretty much flat, with just minor little micro topography throughout the roadway. And also, too, the gentleman did bring up some good points. On this side of the driveway, we do have a rock swale, and then on the other side of that, it's mature trees. So they're not guardrails, but nobody's going to be driving down that hill because it's all wooded.
No. And just
and then there's going to be some slight grading on the other side.
Yeah. For the non-engineers, swale is essentially a rounded mound of dirt, correct? This swale on the hill, it's a rock swale with a trap rock in it, so it won't get eroded. So all along here, it's just a rock, riprap swale, trap rock swale,
that then flows into this basin right here.
Okay. And the steepest part of the grade, where, does that match up to what we see on the map in terms of how far it extends, or how far on the actual driveway layout does that steepest section go?
Sure, okay, so this pretty much, this profile here pretty much follows this. So basically, the steepest part comes right down to about right here, then it just flattens right out.
Okay.
For the rest of the way.
Okay. And the angle of the driveway, that was something that you checked with the zoning bylaws, just for confirmation?
The steepness of the driveway?
The angle in relation to 140?
Yes, that should all be addressed. We went through all those regulations. I also did a site distance out there, and the posted speed limit on Taunton Ave, actually it's a certain speed limit coming this way and a certain speed limit coming that way. So per the AASHTO standards, you have to have at least, I believe it's 250 feet of sight distance coming out of this driveway. You have to be able to see at least 250 feet in either direction in order to meet those sight distance requirements. And we actually exceed it, believe it or not. I know there's a little vertical crest right here where that railroad overpass is, but still, sitting in the car, parked here, waiting to exit, you can still see quite a ways in both directions.
Okay. One of the other things that was mentioned was the railroad tracks. Is there any fencing or barrier, just for people who may not be familiar with the site? Is there an existing barrier to the tracks now? And is there plans to be one post proposed development?
There is no fence, basically, there is no fence along the track at this time.
And the plans at this time do not show any kind of fence or barrier at the tracks? Or is one not allowed because of how the right-of-way works? Or
We have guardrail. That up on the Taunton Ave is just guardrail.
No, I think
There's no fence.
they're talking about the entire length of the railroad along our property line.
Oh, God, sorry.
No, sorry, tracks, not street.
There's no existing fence. Typically, there's a wire fence along the property around railroads. In this case, there is none that I saw for the first several hundred feet. I do not believe there's nothing proposed on the plan of a new fence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, one of the speakers mentioned the ACEC. I assume that all of conservation is looking at all of the requirements related to that.
Yeah, we checked that. It's been so long since I've looked in.
Doing work within an ACEC, certain things thresholds have to be triggered, and we have not triggered any of those thresholds to kick that up to it's called a MEPA review because of the ACEC jurisdiction. So AC jurisdictions are basically these areas, and if you trigger a certain amount of impacts, thresholds, whether it's wetland impacts or traffic impacts or wastewater impacts, then that would trigger additional review through the MEPA process. And we haven't triggered any of those.
Okay, thank you.
And also, if this was still under priority habitat, that would have been outlined on it. I believe it's been changed over the years. It's no longer a priority habitat.
Okay. Okay. The only other thing I had listed down was just in terms of dam and maintenance. Am I correct in assuming that there'd be some kind of a homeowners association that'd be responsible for shared roadway maintenance and dam
Correct.
maintenance?
That was brought up at the last, when we were before the board a couple of years ago, and I think it's already been started, the process of creating an association, but it would trash pickup, maintenance of the driveway, the detention areas, as well as snow removal and the dam. The dam is part of that.
Okay. And then, again, as I think Sherry had mentioned, if the dam stays, if the dam goes away from the state or whatever, nobody may have control over that, but, yeah. Who knows what the state does?
What that process is.
Yeah. Predicting what the state will do is an exercise in futility. Okay. I'll ask one more time if anybody joining the Zoom meeting or here in person would like to come up and ask any further questions or comments. As I mentioned, we'll probably be speaking about this again in the future. I'm not seeing anybody jump up in person or virtually here. Do any members of the board have any additional questions, comments, etc., that we would like to ask of the applicant to either answer or provide an answer at our next session?
Would you say the letter from the fire department and the water department?
Fire and water approval on the designs proposed?
Correct.
Okay.
What about the septic system updates?
I'm sorry, could you come up?
What about the septic system updates?
The septic system, they spoke to that at the beginning. Yes. Okay. So, still have some work to do with peer review for stormwater, etc. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks. Do we think that that would be aggressive to have to get comments to Pat Brennan and back from Pat Brennan? My assumption might be yes.
I would say, play it safe. I would go a couple weeks after that. Otherwise, I don't think we'd have enough time.
Okay.
We can try, but then we might end up asking for a continuance. I don't know if we'll be able to get the information to him for him to review and get it back to us and
Yeah.
get it back to here. I don't know. What do you think,
Yeah.
Sam? Good.
Yeah. If you're not sure, I would tend to agree with you, because if you get comments back on Monday night or Tuesday morning, it limits our ability to do anything with them.
Correct.
So, Brian, what is our October?
The two meetings are the 10th and the 17th.
October 10th and 17th, okay. From the applicant, does anybody have a preference to one or the other, based on anything else in the world?
I'd say October 10th. Does that work? Okay.
Okay. So we'll be looking to a motion to continue to our meeting of October 10th. Is there any further questions or comments for a motion?
Motion to continue SP 20475 to October 10th.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, I am going to, with Jim remote, I am going to go through the roll individually. So Eric, I will start with you.
Aye.
Steve? Wayne?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. So we are continued until October the 10th. 10:10, we will see you then.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Next item on our agenda is site plan review 18562 and SP 18561 for 3 Lokes Drive. I see somebody getting an easel set up here, so I'll let them get settled. If anybody in the room is leaving the room, I just ask that you try and keep any noise down while the other applicant is presenting, please.
The state environment, they should send us one.
We are ready when you are, sir.
All right, good evening. My name is Walter Hermano, professional engineer, Hermano and Hermano Consultant Engineers. Thank you for hearing us tonight. Tonight, I'm representing JLW LLC. He is the applicant of this project proposed on 3 Lopes Drive. The applicant currently runs a business there, Northeast Bridge Riggers. If anyone's not familiar with that business, what they do is, and I'm not going to do it justice, but I'll try and be short, they provide the equipment that oversees the snoops and so forth that will be on bridges and do the inspections underneath the bridges, both over rail, roadway, and over water. They are at the end of Lopes Drive, and 3 Lopes Drive is a site that's over 5.5 acres approximately in size. What the applicant wishes to do is replace the existing 1,800 square foot building with a 4,800 square foot building using the existing footprint. Give you a little more background on the project. Given that we're over the 2,500 square foot requirement for special permit, that's why we're before you. They originally in 2017, and I think the chairman was the only member on at that time, again, correct?
I remember your description of the business then as well, yes.
Okay. They received a special permit to operate this business because they did have some hazardous materials used in their business, even though they're a very eco-friendly business. They're very responsive. They don't just let spills occur on the property. They maintain and they take care of things right away. He runs a very clean operation. It's a private business, not open to the public. In recent years, he has bought a piece of land back here that abuts Interstate 495, and he's actually pushed out his storage trailers back there on land that was cleared by the previous owner of that property. And I'll revisit that in a little bit. He has an existing building right here, 7,500 square feet per the previous special permit. And this one, as I said, he wants to remove and replace that with a larger building. Again, doing the same thing that he's doing right now. He is a metal welding and fabrication classification. And what he welds is, it's plasma arc welding. He's relying on electricity. He's not relying on hazardous materials in the process. And most of the work that he does inside that building that he's proposing will be cutting, not necessarily welding. He fabricates a lot of his own equipment. All right, we are within a 3-mile river ACEC watershed, and we're also within a Zone 2 and interim wellhead protection area. Again, these are not new. These environmental resources were permitted and approved long before 2017 when we first got the special permit. The only change that he's requested on this property is the new building, which is slightly larger, so you'll have a net increase of 3,000 square feet. He has a polymer coated galvanized roof that's proposed for this building. All right, that does not require any special treatment under the stormwater management standards. If it was just steel or galvanized, yes, but it's polymer coated, so it does not require any special treatment. We'll move on to, well, first I should say, entire site industrial zoned. He is up against property over here that is R80, of which he owns this area also. The abutters are industrial zoned as well. We have BVW, previously identified off-site, and this is the 100-foot buffer. There's no work proposed within the 100-foot buffer. I've met with the conservation agent out there on the property, and we have received a stormwater management permit through administrative approval because the total disturbance on the property is less than an acre. Included with that permit was an area back here that was a prior non-compliance, not any doing of my clients, but the previous owner had cleared the site. It was less than an acre, but it was cleared. He bought it that way. He's using that area now, and we're bringing it into compliance. These are the proposed conditions. As you can see, it is just a building that's larger. He wants to improve the other building by removing it and putting together this 4,800 square foot building. The entire roof will be infiltrated right here through a simple Cultec infiltration basin that's underground. It will infiltrate all storm events through the 100-year, fully attenuated, there'll be no overflow. But he does have proposed at each corner an emergency overflow in case we get any events that are larger than the required 100-year. The stormwater drainage, I wasn't looking at the entire site because just this particular area, as you can see in this heavy line, is about 1.5 acres. And that's really being generous, but that is the drainage area that's in respect to the proposed work. And the proposed work is over an existing disturbed area. He's not proposing to disturb any ground that wasn't already disturbed. So we develop our existing drainage area to determine the amount of water that was leaving the property to a design point. That design point is right along this property line in this general vicinity, low spot heading towards the wetlands. So we have a post-development drainage area. I kept the same amount of area, 1.55 acres. The net peak rate of flow and runoff is going to be less than the existing conditions, because currently there's nothing capturing the water off of the 1,800 square foot structure. This proposed building, even though it's larger, all of the water will be captured off of that building. So we're going to have a net reduction in the amount of runoff, both the peak rate and the volume. This building does require connection to a non-hazardous industrial wastewater holding tank. There is currently one on the premises, and he proposes to connect to that. The building will also be serviced by water and electricity that's already currently on his site. The connections there too have to be made. These are the details showing drainage, piping around the building, industrial existing non-hazardous wastewater holding tank. These are the Cultec infiltration basin, and we're set plenty enough about the water table. The water table was determined by existing test pits. The site was formerly, if anyone's maybe familiar with this, they used to take sand and gravel out of there, so it's very porous. Hence why you're on top of an IW, interim wellhead protection area, zone 2, etc. So we have existing sands and gravels underneath the proposed infiltration basin, allowing for a tremendous perk rate, percolation that is. So we have at least 4 feet of separation, and since we're attenuating all the way through the 100-year storm event, which is more than the 10, 25, and 100, I did a mounting analysis, which usually we don't do, but I provided that anyhow, and we have a negligible increase of maybe 0.04 feet in the water table. It's just so sandy you can't get a mound to develop, but since it's required, I provided that anyhow. We use a software called MoundSolve, very complicated. It's a nice piece of software, gives you the ability to input a lot of factors, a lot of data, and it gives you a robust calculation and answers you can rely upon. These were the soil test pit logs for the existing test pits that were near the infiltration basin. Erosion control detail right here. Again, we're not within the 100-foot buffer. And again, it's a very simple project. There's very limited details that are required. In summary, he wants to replace the existing 1,800 square foot building with a 4,800.
So start with kind of questions. You mentioned that the special polymer coating on the roof required no special treatment. What do you mean by special treatment? Just to, as it relates to what aspect of the bylaws, et cetera?
Oh, good question. It's in regards to removal and treatment in addition for total suspended solids, maybe other pollutants that might travel, be carried across the ground for oil and so forth. But it's just rainwater that's hitting the roof, and it's not reacting with the roof. So it's not going to take out another mineral, which would be zinc, which you carbon pollutant. When you find that's coming off of galvanized when it's bare, that's not good in a protected aquifer. So the roof is polymer coated, just like his existing 7,500 square foot building. It's going to be the same roof. Basically, it's a smaller version of his existing building.
So you don't need a scroll chamber or something like that to...
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're meeting the stormwater management standards of the handbook, the state handbook, and also of the stormwater management bylaw for the town of Norton. We have 80% TSS removal by the infiltration basin, which is what's required.
Okay, thank you. Just clarifying in terms of what we were not paying attention to.
There's a lot to unload, so if you have any other questions, you want to know more about it, just prompt me and I'll give you that information.
Unfortunately, the more you talked, Walter, the more I wrote down.
Go ahead.
Are we in front of Concom for this also?
No, we're not.
No.
No. We're outside of the 100-foot buffer.
Yep.
So we do not file with conservation.
Okay.
And you said John gave it administrative approval?
Yes. Yeah. The agent has been out there, I met him on the site.
Yeah.
And he actually politely pointed out the other area on the project, not in respect to what we're doing. That was
So
prior.
that's one of my first things to start with. I guess this is a judgment thing that I've kind of experienced in the past. Since this is a site plan review, I look at this as the whole site now. If you're disturbing some of it, now we're looking at the whole site, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know, Tim, how you feel about that. That's been my experience in the past. If this isn't just looking at the building. If we're in a site plan review, we're looking at the whole site now.
Yeah. From a stormwater perspective, the conservation agent said that area would be in compliance.
Outside of Concom, nothing to do with Concom. I'm saying for us, we're looking at this whole site, not just this building.
Yeah, and if you look at the Google Earth view, it looks pretty much like the site plan.
Yep. So I guess going off from that, are we going to have to bring this whole site under storm compliance with stormwater management? Would be my first question. My second question is, what are we doing, as you brought up, the area that was cleared, that it was not in compliance? How do we bring it up into compliance? Who said it was not in compliance? That's why I asked if Concom's involved. There's no orders from them. What's that situation? I'll just keep going for a minute. All those storage containers, since they're on the plan, multiple experiences in the past, those all need to be permitted. Are they permitted?
Yes, they are.
Every single one of those has permits?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
They never do, that's why. No one ever pulls permits for them.
I can assure you, the owner, Mr. Wakes, he is fully compliant, and he does not choose to ever cut corners. He is above board and top notch. I can't say that for all clients. I can say that for this one.
Well, he is paying you though, so.
Exactly. No, truthfully, yeah, he is paying me. I'm not here on a volunteer basis.
So I guess that's my question. Why are we not going to, if we're going this, does this whole site have to be brought up to stormwater standards? Is I guess my question, or comment.
So you're asking whether the administrative approval is correct? Because you're looking at this from an entire site perspective, not...
That's been my experience.
Not an additive, not a, here's where we are now, we're approving existing conditions.
That's where I'm hung up, because I just have experiences, that's how it's applied.
Yeah. I mean,
in some jurisdictions.
And I won't speak for you, so correct me if I say something wrong. The stormwater bylaw is that post-development you need to retain or treat, needs to be equal or better, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That's the dumbed-down version of how I understand our stormwater bylaw, is everything needs to be retained or as much as it was or better post-development. And he stated that it will, because he's treating 3,000 feet of building that doesn't exist.
For the new development of the old site, now we're looking at the site plan theoretically as a whole, does the rest of the site comply?
Not
I
any
mean, we
less
wouldn't
than
be
it
able to,
does.
we can't.
I have experience
We
with-
don't have the pre-build conditions of the other site at all.
I have an experience where similar, doing an addition, and now you trigger because of a use, bring your whole site up into compliance with stormwater.
If I may, we have been through this with the existing layout of the site, just shy of some area over here.
Yep, so what,
And the verdict was, and it was settled, I believe, I know we consulted with the DEP, and I believe the applicant had to defend himself in court over this case. It was supported by the DEP to not increase any pavement on this property because it was beneficial to the environment to have the water percolate into the ground. So there was no additional pavement required as part of that previous approval, except for what you see around the building, where we were required by the bylaw to have permanent parking spaces.
and what triggered it more in my head, you said hazardous use, or whatever term you had used.
Yeah.
Um,
Hazardous materials.
Yes.
Of which, in his new building, he'll have none. And he has not increased any use of hazardous materials on the property since his original
So
special permit was granted.
The clearing of, the illegal clearing, however you want to phrase it, the jurisdiction was DEP, there's some type of DEP order?
No. This was brought to our attention by the conservation and looking at aerials, that this area was previously owned by another party. It wasn't my client.
Yep. You inherited it?
No, he bought it already cleared.
Yeah.
The party that has a billboard over here, okay, went through the permit with the town in order to approve improvements or put up a billboard. I forget exactly, don't fault me. But that was done by the prior owner. That was not done by the current owner, the applicant of the property, who has owned this piece of this property since 2011, thereabouts 2012. But he bought, when he had the opportunity, that became for sale, so he bought it. He would just move his trailers a little further back because he needed more space.
So I guess in my head, I'd be comfortable with something like, in the theoretical conditions of, you always phrase this better than I do, sign off of the conservation agent and building inspector as to existing conditions are all in compliance, something of that nature.
Do we have John's letter in Permitize for this property? Or do we have a letter from John? Okay.
Walter may have one, but.
Just today, he actually issued this, but I was only able to give him the site plan.
Okay.
Just today.
If you, maybe the wording, Alan, could be.
That's why I say you always phrase it better than I do.
I mean.
You kind of know what I'm saying.
I have small children, so my BS meter is always on. So the contingent on approval from the conservation agent with respect to stormwater management on the site, including both the new building and however you want to identify that additional parcel.
Prior area.
Whatever that's marked as, or if you want to call it a book number, or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
So you're saying with respect to the new building as well as this one over here, conservation agent says that it is in compliance. So if we have that from John, then does that satisfy what you're? Okay.
Even in the condition, as I'm saying.
Yeah, and we get a conditional for that, so he can. So if he's giving you a letter, but it may not say, hey, can you make sure that in your letter it also calls out this other area?
Yeah.
That's it.
We can ask the agent for the letter. He has issued a stormwater permit, which speaks to that. If you ask for a separate letter, I can ask him for that also.
Just an email. I mean, just an email for him saying it. This also includes
I've been
That
out there,
that
I've seen
additional-
existing conditions and there's.
that additional parcel, yeah.
Exactly.
So that would put the whole site in compliance from his perspective.
Sure. Okay. And I should point out, I didn't do a good job of clarifying this. Most of this site is, it's virtually level back here. You can see up here that there's a grade change where they limit, so the former gravel removal basically stopped. I've been to this site many times, even when it's downpouring, he doesn't have runoff. It's just flat. If there is runoff, it might be a trivial amount that went down this way, maybe, possibly. But for the most part, heavy storms, it just goes right through. It's all sand and gravel.
And he probably doesn't want a whole lot of grade moving those big things, so.
No. Thank you for the questions. Any other questions, please?
Laura?
I don't think this falls, well, I know it doesn't fall within our purview, but I was curious with regards to the containment, what's it called now?
That containment chamber between the two
Yeah.
buildings?
So, yeah, connect new building floor drains to the existing, a holding tank, containment tank. So the old building was not previously connected to it, so you're gonna be potentially 65% increasing its usage by the new size of the building, of the size of the new building. I am assuming, and I don't know under whose purview that falls, whether that's Board of Health or if that's the building commissioner.
Plumbing code, actually.
Is it plumbing?
Yeah.
I don't know, water sometimes falls within
This is-
Board of Health too.
Yeah, this was plumbing.
I just want to make sure you, either talked to them already and that tank has enough capacity and is up to code to meet the needs of the new building.
Yeah. A little background on the non-hazardous industrial wastewater holding tank, long name for that structure. Every time you have access through an overhead door to a building from grade, not on top of, at height, but from grade, you're supposed to have a floor drain. And that's why this building has a floor drain, if not more than one. And that's why the new building will also have to have a floor drain, because he will have access through some overhead doors. And that's to catch, in the event there was a spill on the ground, and it's also to catch meltwater coming off of the vehicles. I haven't inspected
It's supposed to separate
this.
out the oil, right?
To capture it, it's a holding tank and has alarms. And when it's 3/5 full, the alarm goes off. And then the owner is prompted to go out there and remove the contents, which I can't speak for this exactly, but if I were to go out and inspect that tomorrow, I don't think there'd be any liquids in it because he runs a very clean operation.
You have to have it pumped annually anyway.
If there's something in it, correct.
I'm assuming somebody needs to inspect that and determine it's got enough capacity to cover both new building, the old and the new building.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that code is it doesn't tell you how many floor drains you have to have. You can have one small floor drain in the corner of the building over there, and the door's over here, and it passes through.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to flow towards it or anything.
Right. And to your point, sir, that is, the size is another thing.
It's not regulated.
It doesn't say you have to be 5,000, 10,000, 1,000, but this is a tank inside of a tank. So the smaller one's 1,000 inside of a bigger one, which is 2,000, which is double containment, just in case, given the area that we're in. But that's a requirement anyhow for those structures. So I guess it would be at his own peril. If he was filling that thing up every month, he'd have to have it pumped out every month.
And nobody wants service calls.
No. I don't recall he's ever pumped it since it was first approved in 2017. I can ask him. I can email the board if you wish. I can double check on that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's, I don't know if we feel like we need that, or if it's gonna be approved by, under plumbing code or building
I
commissioner.
just want to make sure somebody's, the appropriate people are looking at it, or have already looked at it on the plans, that's all.
So, now would that be building
It'll
commissioner?
be caught under the building permit, will be caught by the.
Building commissioner? Oh. So, again, you'd be okay with a condition that the building inspector signs off on the use of that tank for the new building as well?
Yeah, sure.
From a sizing and et cetera perspective? Which they probably have to do anyway, but that's okay. Okay.
Sign off by appropriate department? Because it might be plumbing inspector.
Appropriate department, sure. Okay. Any additional questions for Mr. Hermano?
I'm good on this one.
Okay. So we have a special permit and a site plan review. Correct? So, do you wanna,
Yeah, Mr.
They asked for a
Chairman.
waiver of parking and landscaping too. We
Okay.
discussed.
we have not discussed those, yes. I think we discussed that it's not open to the public, but we didn't necessarily tie that to the waiver, but,
If I may, I realized the waiver for the parking was an error on my part, and I peeled that off the plan. We're still asking for a waiver of the landscaping within the 100-foot buffer to residential zone property, given this is industrial and this is residential. Again, this is what we went through before with the original special permit. And the existing landscaping was to be kept in place, which it has been. And again, we're working on this portion of the property over here, and the buffer lies over here against the R80 zoning district. So we're not up against it in this particular limit of work, but again, as the gentleman points out, it's the whole site that we're looking at. So we're still asking for that waiver for the landscaping, because we've already been through that once before in 2017. What else?
so a waiver to stay with existing conditions.
Correct, that's correct. And if I may, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't sure if this was a modification of the modified special permit. It's not new, because he has a special permit to operate out there, and it was modified in 2017. So I'll let the board decide the appropriate language for that. I'm not
The
council.
The reason that you're here is the special permit because the new building is over 2,500 square feet, correct?
Correct.
I would view it as
A new special
A new
permit,
special
just for the
permit.
building.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the other special permit.
Okay.
unless you have any objection to us for
No
it that way.
objection, no objection. I'm just trying to find the easiest way to
Doesn't
explain
seem
that.
easier than that.
I know, but no, sometimes squirrels
But I
get
tell you
turned
before, the more
into
you talk, the more questions I get.
Yeah. No, but then it also becomes a how was it advertised as modification? I don't think it was. So it's advertised as a new special permit, so we should treat it as a new special permit. That would be my, okay. So in terms of, so we have a waiver from the landscaping requirement, and we had potential conditions proposed in that the plan has stormwater approval from the conservation agent tied to the entire site. And the other condition is that the appropriate town department signs off on the expanded use of the non-hazardous holding tank.
I got one question.
Yes.
You said you're not gonna take a waiver on the parking. Does that mean that you already have the requirement, or you're gonna be adding parking?
He's showing it on the plan.
Okay, so that's,
Yeah,
that fits.
we've added 2 spaces,
Okay.
where we had 3 before, we now have a total of 5.
Okay.
And-
And you could park 40 cars on the site without breaking a sweat,
Sure.
so,
And we're not open to the public, it's private.
yeah. But if you're not asking for a waiver anyway, it's, yeah. Okay.
So the landscaping waiver will be on the special permit? We're gonna handle each one separately? No, it's gonna be on the site plan.
The landscaping requirement is on the site plan, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's in our,
I generally view the duplication of conditions between special permit and site plan as
Cover bases.
covering bases for, especially because we're only using electronic paper most of the time anyway. So it's not even a waste of paper. So, okay.
So you want all three conditions plus our standard conditions on both?
Yes.
Great.
Okay. So do we want to, do we have a motion on either the site plan or the special permit?
Should we close the public hearing?
Yeah, there's no.
Thank you, that's why I need help. Do you have any objection to us closing the public hearing at this time?
No.
Okay.
Motion to close the public hearing for SPR 18562 and SP 18561.
Seconded.
Thank you, Alan and Laura. Any further discussion on the motion to close the public hearing? Hearing none. Eric?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Wayne?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So the public hearing is now closed. Do we have any further motions?
And motion to approve SPR 18562 with our standard conditions and also condition on the approval of the existing conditions of the site with the conservation agent and building inspector, and the sign off by the appropriate department regarding the existing gas oil separator tying into the new building.
Okay.
And waiving the landscaping requirements.
Okay.
Seconded.
Thank you, Alan and Eric. Is there any further discussion on that motion on the site plan review? Okay. Hearing none. Eric?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Wayne?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Okay. And do we have a motion as relates to the special permit?
Motion to approve SP 18561 with standard conditions and
And the other ones?
the new ones.
Seconded.
Thank you, Alan and Laura. Is there any further discussion on the motion to approve the special permit with conditions as stated? Hearing none. Eric?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Wayne?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Jim, back to you.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Hermano.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, lady and gentlemen. Appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Giving us too much credit calling us gentlemen.
You have a long night. I'm glad I could make it short for you.
Okay. So we had two quick items that, well, I think they're quick, that we pushed to the end of the agenda. In terms of planning board business and policies, Eric, did you want to put your spreadsheet up on the screen and share here?
Actually, Brian, would you mind doing that?
Brian can?
Zoom doesn't like me right now.
Would you rather us start with the election of the committee?
I guess we can do that if we're gonna pull that up. So we had, on our agenda here, a member for the Capital Investments Committee. Laura, did you want to give a bit of background just on what the committee does? And you have been doing it, so.
Yep. So I've been doing it for the past year. We had exactly 2 meetings, one in the spring, one in the fall. We might have had 2 in the spring. It's not terribly heavy lifting, so the town manager has a long-term plan, a 5-year plan and a longer-term plan. People submit capital improvements to their various departments for things that they would like. The town manager makes recommendations for approval to the capital improvements committee. All of the departments come in and kind of plead their case. So for example, in the last round in the spring, capital improvements committee actually approved a change in the permitting software that the town is going to be using. So Permitize will go away and we'll be replacing it with a new, better system, so that was one of the things. Not everything that is requested gets approved. In some cases, especially with police and fire, they may come back with a presentation and find that they could get state money, grant money, money from somewhere else, shared a piece of equipment with another town. But in terms of, so you see what was requested over the years, and then in some cases, things get kind of pushed down the lane because there's not enough money for all of those projects. But the town manager makes recommendations, and the capital improvements committee, while we ask questions, generally kind of signs off on what the town manager recommends.
Okay.
So, kits from fire department, things like that, new police cars, those are the types of things you'd see there. Some of the things at the school, they were looking for upgrades of some theater equipment that was outdated, things along those lines. One-time expenses, not recurring.
Theater equipment that's a fire hazard.
Yeah, and flammable, yeah.
Yeah, that.
That did not get recommended.
Yes, I'm aware.
Yes. I am happy to stay on. I think some continuity could be helpful in that position so that people are aware of what was deferred in prior years and could be the case for maybe them being prioritized in upcoming years. So, but if somebody else has a keen interest in doing it, I'm fine to step down as well.
Okay. So that's a question for the rest of the board. If anybody's interested in joining the Capital Improvements Committee, Laura's already volunteered to continue.
Say support her ambition.
So moved.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further nominations? Going once, going twice? Okay, I'll just go down the roll one more time. Eric?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Wayne?
Yes.
Laura?
Sure.
Alan?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. Okay. Brian, I see you have the spreadsheet up that Eric had started compiling. So again, this is just for discussion. This is a bylaw review list or a priority list.
Well, this one's the priority part. Actually, do you mind going to the second tab?
Sure. Sorry. So priority
No,
list.
that's fine. There we
It's
go.
an
This is
index.
bylaws. So this is kind of filled in what Steve gave, just so you can see at least the examples. But the idea is kind of not too dissimilar what Laura did with the Pine Street project, right? Just every once in a while a bylaw thing comes up, and my question was, are we tracking it? The answer is no. So I'm like, let's just build a tracker. So this is, the idea of this is try to build something where anybody can look at it, see like what we're thinking about, and then there's actually another column behind the faces there. But it's, first column is just bylaw article, then it's bylaws by section, just so people can know where to look. Reason for updates, it was, Steve always said consideration, but I mean, if we're like, this doesn't make sense because, and then that would go there. I put a priority there, just because that's what I'm used to doing. And that, it's like if we had a discussion about bylaws, I find, or just honestly almost anything I've worked on, having a priority kind of helps kind of decide what we want to go after. Discussion day would literally just be one of these meetings, right? Just a bylaw, we just pick a date, we're gonna talk about these bylaws that day. Proposed solutions, those are, again, came from Steve, so you can just get an idea. I kind of shorthanded it. It probably might be better to make it longer, just so we have proper description. And then the column after that would be the town hall date, right? Because eventually that has to go in front of town hall. So,
Okay.
so basically I just built this. I think I was trying to capture everything we might want to be looking for. I don't know if I put too much or too little, if this is something we want to use, but this is my initial idea on a bylaw tracker.
Okay.
Since I see 4 of my ideas and nothing else, I think it's great.
Best tracker ever. Yeah.
From a structure standpoint, how do we feel that it's worthwhile having either a link or to another document or a tab for each of these, laying out proposed wording or something like that. Because we can, some of these are pretty straightforward, change one number to another number. Some of the wording changes that we get into turn into a lot of semantic dissection.
I think
for
just
better or for worse.
I would think for just think of centralization, just having tabs, and then we can get rid of the tabs.
Make
once
it
we-
giant cell that wraps a bunch of things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Honestly, it's been a little while since I've used Excel as a project management software. But yeah, that's how I would split it up. It's just be a tab with the name of whatever, and then
Whatever your,
whatever the article title is.
whatever's in
or-
column A, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, we can actually add a new column A with just numbers, and then we can reference the numbers down the tabs or something like that.
Yeah, or something.
Yeah. Yeah, we can.
You could probably just do link and link to the tab, and you click the link and it goes to that tab.
Yeah,
And that way you don't have to create an arbitrary numbering system.
Old habits, let me tell you.
Oh, I know.
I appreciate the keeping track of it because, you know, I've only been on for just a little over a year, and I know as we're going, we're like, oh yeah, add that to the list, but nobody was actually keeping a list.
I was gonna, yeah, I say.
There was way too much other things to keep track of than, you know, things like, you know, just off the top of my head that I know have come up, noise ordinances in general. Has been brought up by members of the public on a number of occasions, and I know Mr. Carliano wanted some updates to the solar bylaws, including adding a noise ordinance within that, so maybe that all works in conjunction with one another, or maybe we take them separately, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's great to have it so that when, add that to the list, somebody's actually adding it to the list. Yeah.
And I'm happy to do that part, you know, just add it to the list as it comes up. And then it would just be like every once in a while, we just wanna, as a group, check the list, right? And then just, you know, either decide, okay, we're gonna have a bylaw session, or just be like, you know, just make sure that what I'm writing down makes sense to everybody, so. I do generally, just so you know, my notes are generally long. So I try to capture as much as I can in detail, so, yeah. The other thing is on the definitions page that initially came up, that's just more suggestion than anything. So we use, like, you know, at work we use, you know, the P0 scale. I changed it to N for Norton because I could. But these are the guidelines that just came off the top of my head again. It doesn't have to be the actual definitions, but I think for this to be successful, I do think we should have a priority list. That way we know kind of what to look at. And, you know, but if we want to have a different definitions for priorities, I'm okay with that. But like
When you say town halls, you're meaning town meeting?
Town meeting, yeah, sorry. I was, again, work is town hall, town meeting is Norton. But yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure, I might tweak the timelines, but that's, from a structure standpoint, I like it.
Okay.
I already put a reminder to write down some of the things I know that I've complained about and not done anything about.
Can we reach out?
I almost put down the map stuff, but I'm like, I'll let you do that.
We have Brian
Map
ask-
scale,
Yeah.
We have Brian ask the ZBA, because I remember from my time there, we would say it all the time, and it was like the same few things, and then we never wrote it down, same thing, always said, yeah, we gotta do that, and then it.
Brian also
Yeah,
started
next
a dialogue with zoning about doing a joint session about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the building commissioner suggested, so I reached out to Tom and let him know that Tim and Tom are probably gonna have a joint meeting for planning and zoning.
Full board or just them? Just you guys?
We're thinking full board, just so everyone can have the idea and everyone's on the same page rather than just have a subcommittee.
I don't need to speak to anybody else's ideas. I like that. In terms of adding things to the list, is this something that we've created and we're asking Brian to maintain so that we're not emailing you outside of a public session? Is that correct? Probably.
Probably, but also, again, I wouldn't mind, you know, I don't want necessarily load up Brian with more stuff, so I don't mind if he just is the pivot point, and then I just add it from there, so either one's fine.
That's, yeah, that works, yeah,
Yeah.
but just to,
Right on the top of my head, and I don't know where it is in the bylaw, but it says can't have more than one truck over 6,000 pounds.
Yeah.
In every SUV.
Think,
If
can maybe
anyone
do
has
it.
two SUVs, they're in violation of that bylaw.
Yeah, it's a
I mean,
tough
two
one.
pickup trucks are in violation of that bylaw.
Especially for like a home business or
That one's
something.
gonna go.
there's so many.
Yeah,
And
Well,
if you count a trailer
there's
as
so
weight too.
yeah.
Yeah.
It specifically says truck.
I'm really not looking forward to digging into that wireless tower one again.
Well, that's what kind of, that one stuck out to me, because I'm like.
That one, yeah, the one where we had to,
Oh, yeah,
where we
it
were supposed to
falls
design
on-
the site plan so a fence could fall 300 feet.
Yeah. And
That was
then
fun.
It doesn't tell you if it's from the actual tower or the
Structure.
Of the
footprint of the
structure.
tower that you have to measure it from.
Yeah, that's where we had a fence falling 300 feet. It was
Yeah.
brilliant, yeah.
Can you refresh my mind too? I'm just thinking about where we stand with the our overlay district that we need for MBTA.
Sorry, so far we're still working with Serpide, and they are still in the process of finalizing that.
So what's time frame? It's pretty specific, wasn't it?
It is, I think it's next year that it has to be done. So
I
we
thought
do
it was,
have-
I thought it was by next year.
Spring or fall town meeting.
Right, but I think they're,
So that could take a little bit of work on our part,
Yeah.
You want to be careful how much we're inundating town meeting with bylaw changes.
More than one at a time, I don't think we do.
I don't mind more than one at a time as long as they're simple and focused.
Yeah,
People don't like giant bylaw article that takes 4 pages. People do like, I want to change this to this and it makes sense.
yep.
Somebody will still fight it, but
I don't mind that.
Yeah.
People are entitled to their opinions, but as long as everybody understands what they're voting on, that's what we want.
yeah.
It's when you get into, I don't even know what I'm voting for anymore, that people just vote no because they don't know what it is.
What is
Which
the angle? Are we gonna create a new zoning district, or are we trying to?
are you asking about the
overlay?
MBTA?
Yeah,
So that's required by the state.
sure.
So what they're asking is to have a subsection of the town be this overlay district that would allow for multifamily units by right.
Sure, it was like 15 acres minimum, I think.
There's a whole bunch of
Minimums,
numbers.
and then we have to, it has to be 750 houses, basically, 750 doors.
There's a lot.
As a town, do we wanna attack that as like a new underlying district, like a total district, or like
No.
add multifamily by right as like an
Specifically, yes.
overlay or something?
This is specifically MBTA overlay district, it's a specific overlay.
Yes. And that's
Yes.
assuming
It
that,
has to be
Assign
done.
an area.
and
Is
that's
the
assuming
only-
the whole thing doesn't get changed or whatever, because Middleborough basically gave them the middle finger and
I think
said
they're one of the
not
only
to.
ones though. I haven't heard much about it recently.
Do you have a better way to describe it? I don't.
What I'm asking is like, if we, in theory, if there was like an overlay where we just said multifamily by right and we could place it where we want in town, like that's one option of attacking it. What is being come up with for us? Like, as an MBTA district, is that gonna have train stations, bus stops and everything attached to this district?
No,
No, it's
so,
just housing.
sorry. So the MBTA is, we're a neighboring district.
Sure.
Town, so we have a second level. So we have to be near a train station or bus station, but we don't have to have a train station or bus station.
But because we don't have one right now in Norton, we can decide any part of town to be our MBTA district. If we have a bus station anywhere in town, at that point, it needs to go there. So like, not that we're getting a bus station anytime soon, but, I mean, if we're trying to figure out right now, we're one of the few towns that can decide where to put it, as opposed to a community that already has infrastructure in place. They have to put
Every
it there.
town has to do this overlay district.
Sure, but like, we get the luxury of deciding where, right? Like, we get to,
As long as we account for their standards, we can put it anywhere, that makes sense.
That's what Serpent's doing for us,
Yeah.
is making that doing a review of our zoning and the town as a whole, and identifying where it makes the most sense and making recommendations.
Sure.
Do you know what the next timeline Serpent has for a deliverable on that, or no?
I'd have to go back and look.
Okay.
I don't quite remember.
Okay. If you can just ask when their next, figure out what their next timeline is with us, just so we have an idea of the process.
My next meeting is the 27th for Serpent.
Oh, the Serpent, okay. I was thinking in terms of their deliverable to us on that.
Sure.
Um,
I can inquire.
Yeah, and if there's,
Because they've been talking about it last few meetings?
Nothing about Norton at all.
No, not
specifically.
specifically that.
I assume that I assume the deliverables are
Because at the
specific.
beginning, it was a hot button object, and it
Oh,
was,
yeah.
the chairman was fired up, it was pretty good.
Yeah, I assume the deliverables deliver specifically to us, not so much for everybody else.
Mhm.
But, and then if we're, and then understand what that deliverable is, and if we're looking for them to propose, if what they're going to propose is in line with our expectations, that's all.
Do we already have thoughts of, like, we're the planning board, I guess, do we have thoughts of where we want the MBTA district to be if
So-
we were to get it? Are we supporting it?
So when Paul was here as the planner, he was thinking of having it towards the end of Mansfield Avenue, towards Mansfield.
By Tweeter?
Yeah.
I think it's the perfect area. It's kind
You
of.
just call it Tweeter?
Yeah, I've grown up here. I mean, I guess Tweeter, Great Woods, but
Great
yeah,
Woods are nothing.
Xfinities. My bad.
No, I'm just
I knew what you were
specifically, I knew what you were talking about too. But
My teenage years was right then. I was going to a lot of concerts, but
Tweeter Center.
But we're waiting on Serpent to see if that is the best option, otherwise we'll follow what they're suggesting.
I mean, according to our mapping, that's the primary area of town that can be developed. It's away from the water districts. It's away from
And we wanted
most
to
things
tie
that
it
are
in somehow
protected.
with the master plan, we had talked about somehow tying it into wants and needs from that also somehow.
Serpent worked on that too,
Exactly.
so, yeah, there.
The Grove is almost dense enough itself to be an MBTA district. It's almost there. We're given 5,000 square foot lots.
Yeah.
It's pretty tight. I wouldn't want that to grow to be the MBTA, but to be neighboring it
Yeah.
kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so if we can just identify when they're expecting to have whatever the next process step is to us.
All right.
And then we can talk about that in more detail.
Cool.
And if there's opportunities for us to provide early feedback or thoughts, then maybe we can do that.
So here's a question. It's required by the state. Still needs town meeting approval. If town meeting rejects it.
We will have to lay out the consequences,
Which is
whatever they
steep.
are.
It was a steep consequence.
It was a
right?
very steep consequence.
What was the phrase for the money? What's the?
Oh, it was a big
Cost
giant
prohibitive.
highway bucket.
It was all highway, wasn't it?
I don't know, but it was a big
It
hammer.
was a.
They have a big stick and they're ready, and they say they're ready to swing it.
You'll
Yeah.
never
So-
get your streetlights in
It was
Anything
big.
North and South Worcester.
Exactly, anything to do with,
It was big.
yeah.
No. It wasn't like this little, you don't get this little rinky-dink program. It was not
You
good.
lose some grants.
It was not good.
Yeah.
I've been focused on zoning for like a year and a half now. This is the kind of concept I've been already kind of tackling on my own. I can start presenting my ideas, not immediately, but like relatively soon. You know, again, we're the planning board. We might be relying on Serpent, but I think our input is vital,
Yeah.
so.
That's.
Well, we need them to do the heavy lifting on
Yeah,
that. They're gonna cut it down.
We need some subject matter experts to weigh in.
But if- Yeah, and if.
Especially because they're doing it for multiple towns also.
Yeah, no, and if they say, yeah, we're gonna be back for you in 2 months with an initial round and we'd love to have your feedback, then that lines up pretty well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
And we gotta know what town meeting we're
Yeah,
focusing on. If it's spring, obviously, we gotta map that out pretty quick.
and then we have to prioritize the other things that we want to do based on, so that we're not trying to present two things at once.
I don't mind presenting multiple things at once. I told you.
You're gonna regret saying that.
As long as they put them in a row in the agenda,
You're a crazy person.
and then they make sense, and with no floor changes.
Yeah, the big
basic stuff like, you know,
Having the
weights
bylaw
of
language,
machines.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
anything more complicated than that's,
Yeah, no, I don't, no objections to presenting things. Because I'm probably not gonna support something that I think is bananas and has no chance of passing, so it won't get, yeah, so.
Different subject, wasn't there another joint meeting you wanted to do with conservation, or is that?
No, that was water department.
That,
No,
That's been
it was
moved
water
to-
department, but even before water department.
there was
There was
potentially
conservation.
one with conservation
Or
related to
0 South Washington Street.
the, not Amazon parking lot, but that changed
Yeah.
because they changed it. So,
So going on water department, I was gonna go to the next meeting tomorrow, but I can't make it.
I'll be attending.
Okay, and I think Laura said, so my question, whoever wants to bring it up, I mentioned it to Laura, is they have the tie-in period of 7.5 years if they put a sewer in front of your house. This is stating it as plainly as I can know it. They put a sewer in front of your house, you have 7.5 years to connect. My understanding is the same law applies, or their same policy applies for a private sewer going in front of your house. Is that, so we're not, the town didn't prioritize putting the sewer in, we have a contractor putting a sewer
yes,
down the
because,
street.
because it's feeding into the system that they're
It's-
paying to maintain.
Exactly. So the same laws apply, that these people have to connect in
I-
7.5 years? That's how I interpret it.
I believe so.
And has there any been discussion or leeway, or why would the same rules apply? I guess is my question, but I can't state in person.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the policy. I guess they're viewing it from, people are gonna start using the,
Policies that need to be changed too, if they're not.
yeah, that's how they lay out all their financing and planning and all that stuff.
It's my kind of like outside view that the tie-in thing is what, like, the #1 thing that would hold back any development in town. No matter how good a project is, we all gotta weigh in that it's gonna affect a bunch of people. So like, the best thing could come to town and we still have to kind of maybe be like, nah. That's a huge issue. That 7-year tie-in fee, or the tie-in mandate at all, should be questioned.
But it's,
I understand the mandate, if the sewer's a priority down this road, down this main road.
then you say it's coming anyway,
I
yeah.
completely understand that. I can get behind that, and understand that. But a private development putting one in, why? Why would the rules have to be the same? I guess is my question.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that we want to discuss?
Are we still focused on a life science district in town? That was propositioned at one point, sort of like a,
Yes, we have a
Seminar.
grant for that.
okay.
We are in the process of getting it developed.
Is that also through Serpide, or?
We can double check who the grant goes to.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Alan and Laura. Motion to adjourn. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Eric?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Wayne?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.